Greetings and welcome to Village Connector TV. My name is Glenn Garnes and I'm your host, and I want to thank you for joining us for this segment, Faces Behind the Business. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that should be important to every parent with children grade kindergarten through high school. It's about a very extraordinary, unique, and empowering learning experience offered by the Learning Community International. Today I have with me in the studio Nancy Stempel, the Executive Director of the Learning Community International, and we're going to be talking with Nancy about what is being offered through TLCI and why it should matter to parents and to students for that matter. So Nancy, I want to thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Nancy, we decided we were going to have a very conversational tone to this exchange as opposed to making it a big formal interview.
Sure.
And in full disclosure, I want people to know that I have a student, a TLCI student. So I'm actually going to be asking questions from the perspective of a parent because I am a TLCI parent. And these are the same questions I had as my wife and I were exploring the TLCI learning experience for our son Nolan. So I'm going to be your surrogate today. I'm going to ask the very same questions that most of you will have in determining whether the TLCI learning experience might be one that you should be looking into for your student. So is that fair?
Sounds good.
Well, why don't we then get started?
Alrighty.
All right, so why don't you start off by describing, because this is a very different learning experience for a lot of reasons that we're going to get into, but why don't you start off by explaining what the TLCI concept is? In other words, what's unique about TLCI? What is the reason I should be interested as a TLCI student or TLCI parent in your concept?
The basic concept of the learning community is that it is a collaborative experience between the learning community, the parents, and the students to customize based on the students' learning styles, their interests, and using the whole world as their classroom.
So what you're saying is that the student is getting a different type of learning experience than what they do in a traditional classroom. They're actually collaborating with your staff. That when you said the learning community, you're talking about people who work with TLCI, their parents, and themselves to create a learning experience for themselves.
Correct, and every family is assigned a personal advisor that works with them. So we identify what the strengths and talents and interests are that the students have, and we customize around that.
So tell me why that's important from the perspective of, let's talk about the student first of all. What are you offering a student that's different from the learning experience that they'd have in a traditional elementary, middle school, or high school?
Well, it's pretty much a standardized curriculum, so it's a one-size-fits-all, but actually it doesn't. It doesn't fit every student.
That's that's the traditional system.
Correct. And so we have a lot of different types of parents and different concerns that parents have when they come to us. But basically, the children are not thriving in that situation. And they want a little bit more other opportunities to pursue things that they're interested. Sometimes they're losing interest in what's being presented at the school level. And it's pretty much one kind of presentation. You're sitting in an instructions kind of setting. You're sitting in desks and seats. People can't move around. And there's a limitation. There's a limitation for kids who have different ways of learning.
Now, when we were first introduced as a family to the Learning Community International, you described for me that TLCI was kind of a homeschool, private school fusion. What did you mean by that?
Well, typically people think of a private school, that there's actually a brick and mortar that they show up every day and they go through. And sometimes there's some customization they might be able to do there. But, and then homeschooling is usually you're not in a building, you're at home. So the students aren't showing up in the learning community. They're not showing up in a brick and mortar. They're actually home-based. But the difference is you have all the services and benefits of a private school, different resources, subject specialists, and again, the advisor that helps you customize. And at the end of the day, the students graduate with a private school diploma, and it's an accredited school. So that's the benefit of being part of a private school.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but what I hear you saying as you describe that is that You get the benefits of a private school with respect to the resources that are available, an academic advisor, and you also have available, if a family chooses, tutors and mentors and other people can help with the learning
Correct.
experience. But you have the flexibility of crafting the fashion in which the student chooses to learn specific subjects consistent with their learning style. In a homeschool type of environment, that's where the flexibility comes in.
Right. There's also something really important for middle school and high school kids is actually setting that schedule. There's a lot of studies that have shown that the sleep patterns of students change. And they've identified that a lot of high school students are actually sleep deprived and they're going to high school. So you can even customize your very schedule that best fits your, your sleep schedule better.
And let's face it, not every student is an early riser, and not every student learns exactly the same way.
Exactly.
And so that's why I think that, I found it attractive about TLCI was that we could cater to our child's individual learning style and not have to limit them, hold them back, or have them feeling like they were playing catch up because the rest of the school or rest of the class was going forward in a particular direction and they weren't ready for that direction, or they were even being held back by that direction.
Yeah, it creates a lot of stress. They're trying to meet someone else's standards or someone else's agenda, and they're really not that personally aware yet. They're not even able to articulate that. And then they start thinking something's wrong with me because I'm not meeting up to some other outside standard. So it really takes that pressure off, and they become co-creators and more empowered to manage their schedule, become personally responsible, lifelong learners. All of those things start to, you're allowed for those skills to develop.
Now we're going to get into greater detail about the full concept behind the Learning Community International learning education experience. But this is a new concept for a lot of parents. A lot of parents, they're not familiar with the concept of homeschooling. They're not really even familiar with the concept of sending their kids to private school, except that they understand that a little bit better. Mm-hmm. But they certainly aren't familiar with the concept of a homeschool private school fusion. Mm-hmm. So for the benefit of parents that, they're going to watch this interview and everything, of course, but if they wanted to have a one-to-one with you, do you have a mechanism by which they can ask questions about their individual circumstances versus hoping that I ask the right question for them?
Right, absolutely. If you go to our website, there is a place to fill out a form to request a discovery, a 30-minute complimentary discovery conference with an admissions representative and see if TLCI is the right match.
So that's fantastic because now you take all of the mystery out of how this would work for me.
Exactly.
And frankly, I had a lot of questions, if you remember,
Sure.
about what this would mean for my son, because I was terrified at the prospect of doing something that was going to damage his future.
Right.
And I had a lot of questions, and you all had a lot of answers, and those answers resulted in our making the decision to be a TLCI family. So.
Right, and I think that even though homeschooling has been legal now for over 30 years in pretty much every state in the country, when people think about that opportunity, they become overwhelmed, even though they're looking for something different, but they think, I can't do this by myself. And they can go out into the community, homeschoolers, there's a lot of homeschoolers out there, and find resources. And we've been doing this for so long, we've built the resources on what we think families need to be successful, and we help kind of shorten that span between finding all the resources out there and having them all in one place.
And that's a good point, because one of the things that we had questions about was, in fact, how do we participate in that process? And I know we're going to get into greater detail, and maybe that's a good place for us to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Nancy Stempel, the Executive Director of the Learning Community International, and get a deeper insight into what it would mean to be a TLCI student and a TLCI family. So come back and join us for the rest of this interview. We'll see you in just a minute.